my outside voice. I am so glad to see such a huge crowd here today. This is the final IT Leaders of 2024. This is our last meeting. This is the last meeting of the 8th year of IT Leaders Indianapolis, and I'm super thankful that every one of you chooses to spend your time coming to this event and working on your leadership skills. Leadership in IT is probably one of your best strategies. If you're a good leader, you can solve a lot of technology problems and a lot of people problems. If you're not a good leader, you get to have new employees quite often. So, who are we? We are directors and managers in staff IT positions, typically in non-technology companies, although that's not always true. We've got a smattering of people here from healthcare and financial services and airlines and all sorts of companies. So different industries, lots of the same problems. Leadership, being a good manager when you've been promoted from being an individual contributor 5 minutes ago. That's where many of the challenges live that we're trying to help you address. We do breakfast and networking and then a couple of guest speakers at these events. Both of the guest speakers talk about leadership. We don't talk about technology much, except for the context, because you can get that 50 times a week on webinars and in-person events. If you need to leave early, if you need to leave before 10 o'clock, find me or text me. That's my mobile number up on the board there. I will have a couple of other people from Expedient back here that can ferry folks back and forth to the front door. You can look for this tag. The folks who walked you in are the ones who will help get you out if you need to. Bathrooms are over here. There's food, there's coffee. Nobody ever eats here. Oh, look, there's some of the rolls are gone. That's fabulous. Glad to see it. And again, text me if you need to leave early. The best way to stay informed about what's going on is our website, which is now under construction. We are moving it from the Science Fair project stage of WordPress to something that's attractive and a little bit more focused on a multi-market and providing you content on leadership and giving you good access to the content that we produce in terms of podcasts and YouTube videos after these events. So itleaders.org/Indianapolis. For right now, that's going to point you to the next registration page. That'll be updated for the January event here in the next day or two. But I'm excited about getting the website up to date. I think it's going to be super cool. IT Leaders Indianapolis is also a LinkedIn company page. I always link to that when we are talking about these events on social media. So I would encourage you to follow that company page on LinkedIn as well. That's another way to stay reminded of what's going on. And then we've got a LinkedIn private group called IT Leaders Community that lets you talk to each other. And that actually is nationwide now. So we're going to drive a lot more activity to that event in the coming year. And I'll talk a little bit more about the nationwide nature of IT Leaders in a second. Twitter, X, IT Leaders Com, meaning IT Leaders Community. We'll be a little bit more active on that in the coming year as well. Oops. The private group, as I mentioned, is a great way to talk to your peers about vendor offerings, about leadership questions. So if you're looking for a peer group where you can just pose questions at any time, you don't have to wait for a bi-monthly meeting here in Indy, I would encourage you to join that. We moderate that and make sure we don't allow vendors in there. It's the leaders only who are in that meeting, just like in this meeting in general. So we want to make sure that you have some privacy when it comes to asking questions of each other. If you're a social media person, if you use LinkedIn or any of the other platforms, our hashtag is ITLeadersIndy. And take some pictures if you would please this morning. And if you would text those to me, I'll publish those on the after event recap on LinkedIn. Take pictures of the speakers and talk about what you learned. I think it's useful and it will help you spread the word to your circles of influence about whether they should come to this meeting or not. We have a mentorship program that started up about a year after we started this event. and it's a self-service program. We got a couple of mentors in the room right now. Mike Highline is in the room. He's chosen to be a mentor. It's a self-service program, so you get your LinkedIn up to date. I've got a one-pager that I can send you, but you get your LinkedIn up to date, and then you write down your hallucination of a career path. And then you reach out to one of the mentors who's willing to mentor, and you agree to 3 dates to meet up and see if there's some chemistry there. And if it's good, you can continue on. If it's not that great, then you can choose another mentor. Not a lot of friction, but I think it's a great way to find a new mentor if that's important. Who thinks mentors are a waste of time? Okay, good. I think they're you do? You've had them? You got rid of all yours? You've done it now?
Nobody wants to mentor Mike.
I'm tired of it.
They all died off.
Yeah. I think mentorship is one of the greatest things there ever was. I've been fortunate to have 2 of my 3 real big mentors in my life were actually bosses of mine. I think that's more rare these days than it used to be. I think a lot of times mentorship is outside of the organizations that you work in, but don't miss out on the value of mentorship. I think it's an amazing way to engage, and it doesn't have to be IT to IT. There's all sorts of programs like Edge Mentoring and Big Brothers, Big Sisters that you can be involved in as a mentor, or you can reach out to someone as a mentee. We have restarted the IT Leadership Boot Camp. We have not nailed down dates for 2025 yet, but Stephanie Crevens is going to be leading that group. $1,250 buys you, I believe, 3 sessions, a disc profile and a 360 profile. Some really great guest speakers here locally. Some of the speakers we've had historically here at IT Leaders Indianapolis. If you are a new leader, or if you've got new direct reports or direct reports who are not particularly self-aware, I know that's unusual in IT, but it still happens. I would encourage you to consider this as a great way to get someone off on the right foot or to get someone realigned with their leadership journey. I'm a huge fan of Stephanie. She is amazing. And when you first meet her, you think she's going to fly apart. She just vibrates almost. She's so intense and interesting. But she is such a good teacher that I would really encourage you on this. And the price is right. Get it in your budget this year so you can spend the money next year. Spend your own money on it if it's important to you, the leadership. That is the link. That's the QR code to get to the link. We'll be announcing dates soon. So I love cross-promoting other events, and we do this in all the cities that we're involved in. We have a lot of groups here in Indianapolis that you have access to. Matt Bellinger, you can talk to us about, there you are, you can talk to us about a couple of the events, apart from IT Leaders, that are available to people here in Indy.
Sure, thanks Doug. I'll talk about 2 groups. The first will be the Indiana CIO Network. So if you're a CIO, CTO, CISO, CDO, VP of IT, or if you're in a large organization and you report directly to the top leader in IT, the CIO Network is the place for you. Or mention this to the right person in your organization, right? We mix breakfast events and dinner events. We have a few other, we're really interested in multiple joint events now. We did a really fun reception event with women in high tech during the Women in Tech Week. That was really great. We'll do some more of those coming up in 2025 as well. Our final event of the year is December 11th, and we're doing that as a joint event with the Indiana Founders Network. And that's a new network that's really taken off this year. So that'll be at IWU on December 11th. Really encourage all of you to come and join that. And then I'll also talk about SIM, Society for Information Management. That's a great group here in Indy. And we get together for breakfast once a month. The next breakfast, final breakfast of the year, is the following day, December 12th. So if you're looking for breakfast, that's the week to do it. And SIM also has other events. They have a golf outing, and they have the symposium. Many of you have attended symposium. We had a great symposium this past year in October, and we're already starting to plan for symposium 2025. So looking forward to another great event.
Thank you very much. Is there any qualification or rank on SIM to become a member of SIM?
Yeah, that's a great question, Doug. I think back in the day, it started as sort of that top level IT person,
Yeah.
but it's not so much anymore. So if you're an IT leader, there's opportunity for you in SIM. Yeah.
You know, and these events are not either or, they're both. I mean, take advantage. These are different circles of influence. You'll learn different things. We love other events. Any other events that you attend that you value that the rest of the group might benefit from? Anything to speak up on that we should know about? Okay, sounds good. This is your part of the meeting. We started this a couple of years after we started IT Leaders, and this is an opportunity, if you have open positions in your organization, that you can say those out loud to this group and maybe crowdsource your next best employee. Or if you are in transition, or if you're quietly or not so quietly looking for your next position, you can speak up about that here. Let's start with open positions in your organization. Anyone who has open positions in their group that you'd like to speak up about? I know it's the end of the year, it's not an ideal time for that.
We got a couple.
Okay, Mike.
If you have people in your networks, but we're looking for some Python developers. So if you know some up and coming kids, we're looking for different skill levels. So you got some younger folks, some mid-seasoned people. If you got any recommendation for primarily looking for good people first, but then also good developers, or if they want to get into Python development and they haven't done it, we're willing to talk to them as well.
And that's 5 Rivers Automation, the numeral 5, right?
That's correct.
That's right, okay. Anyone else? Any open positions that you want to mention here before we get moving? Who's looking for their next role? Go ahead. Say your name and what you're looking for.
Morning, everyone. Paul Arbaugh. As some of you may have seen in the local news, IU is going through a restructuring, and unfortunately, I am not an ongoing part of that. Looking for a senior PMO role, have experience both in pharma, insurance, healthcare now as well. Beyond that, I have 4 patents in the defense industry, so if you happen to look for someone with a more technical slant as well, and like to blow stuff up, I mean, you got to blow stuff up every once in a while. But yeah, so looking for something in a PMO organization.
Thanks, Paul. Who else? Who else is looking for their next role? Come on, don't be shy. Go ahead. Anshul?
Yeah, hello everyone, Anshul Chandra. So I was working with insurance auto auctions till earlier this year. So some of you may know, like, it divested from Car Global back in 2019. So I was with them like for the last 3 years or something. I was leading the enterprise PMO there, working with the executive leadership, helping them execute on their business strategy, and also like working with the transformation office, like setting it up, running strategic initiatives, long-term initiatives. In terms of like my broader experience, I have worked as an IT strategy consultant, worked with CIOs, senior leaders, and I've played a role like both on the consulting side, corporate side, ran strategic programs, stood up transformation offices and everything. The kind of roles I'm looking for will be more on the lines of Office of the CIO, Office of the CTO, working closely with like CIOs, CTOs, senior leaders, helping them run their organizations, strategy planning, strategy execution, governance, like setting up the entire office and running it alongside with the C-level leader, right? So that's like, those are the kind of roles I'm looking for.
Thank you, Anshul.
Thank you.
Who else? Anybody else? Go ahead.
So my name is Hunter Bowman. I graduated about 3 years ago, and I've been doing marketing ever since for a company called Chipotle Hotman. I just turned 26, and so I'm kind of like seeing where my career path could go, and I kind of want to shift more into like IT, data, and that sort of thing, because not only do I think it's really interesting, especially nowadays, because everything's driven off of like data and intelligence, but it's also a good career path. So I just recently completed a data analytics certification with Springboard, and so I'm just trying to like fill out what I can see what's out there, but I'm kind of like more of a like where I can kind of use my like business side and also like my technical and data side as well, just any open role and things like that, not super picky.
Thanks, Hunter. Anyone else? last chance. Go ahead.
Tina Rasmussen, recently left CNO.
Okay.
Application delivery, I was at Anthem for 14 years prior to CNO,
Okay.
5 years at CNO. Focuses on application delivery, agile, safe implementation, IT leadership. I have a passion for IT leadership, so I've been involved with this group via LinkedIn for many years, but this is my first time coming
Great.
to this event, so.
Long-time
wish I had
listener.
come sooner. Anyway.
Thank
still
you.
looking for opportunities in that space.
Thank you, Tina. Anyone else? Great. Thank you. Great participation. I love that. If you like what we do here, you can get videos of previous events at Expedient's YouTube channel. So youtube.com/Expedient/videos. Takes us about a couple of weeks to get these posted once they happen, but you can review and see the presentations and actually see the events from end to end in action. We also started trying out the audio from these events, and there's podcasts now that you can subscribe to called IT Leaders. And I would encourage you to do that. They're 30 minutes, just like the talks, and it's a great way to consume. I usually start there when I want to revisit what the speakers spoke about, and then if you find it engaging, you might also check the video out if you want to look at the slides. This is the schedule. Take a picture of this if you've got a moment. This is the schedule. We normally meet on the third Tuesday of every other month, but there's a couple of exceptions to that on this. I believe that January and May are the exceptions from the third Tuesday. This will normally, this will get posted and you'll get reminded via email about these events, but this is the schedule for Indy for the coming year. Everybody got that?
Yes, sir.
And we have got a bunch of new cities coming. We started in, let me give you just a quick overview of where we are these days. Started in Indy 8 years ago, started in Louisville 3 years ago, and started in Fort Wayne a little over a year ago. So all those are up and running and doing extremely well. I would encourage you, if you're close to any of those other cities, to come visit. You can see great speakers and meet some new folks who are in your positions in those other cities. Phoenix and Denver started this last year. We started in both those markets, and they've been really good. If you grab the Phoenix video or the Phoenix talks, the CIO of the Phoenix Suns and the former trainer of the Phoenix Suns both have really great talks. I would encourage you to listen to both of those. They're super good. So those are going to continue on. And in 2025, we're going to start in, it looks like, not guaranteed, but it looks very strong that Milwaukee, Cleveland, and Pittsburgh, we've got the Rust Belt IT Leaders states coming up shortly. What does that mean to you? You live in Indy, you service Indy. It means there's going to be more content for you to listen to and more opportunities for you to hear about leadership and learn about leadership. So encourage you to come if you can and take advantage of the content that we're creating additionally. The next meeting is January 28th. It's the last Tuesday of January. It'll be right back here like we always meet. We always meet here. And Joe Rogalski from Delta Faucet is going to be speaking. We are nailing down his topic later this week. And Teresa Conroy Roth, who's been involved in IT here in the community, and she has a great short podcast where she interviews local IT people and has a wide variety of experience. She'll be speaking as well. I want to spend a couple of extra minutes on this topic before we move forward and listen to our speakers. Expedient had the vision for this meeting long before I started it. They actually started it with a sub-CIO group in Columbus, Ohio. There was a thin air, so to speak, CIO group. It was all publicly held companies that were gigantic. And there was really no place for CIOs who were in mid-market companies to meet. So we worked with a big CIO group and started something like what we do here up way back when. It was actually in around 2012, I believe. When I joined Expedient, I saw the same need for directors and managers. So they allowed me to spend my time putting on this meeting, recruiting speakers and recruiting folks like you to come and help you work on your leadership skills. It's extremely rare in today's markets that a service provider will provide value to communities with really no expectation of anything in return. So I just want to show my gratitude to Expedient for the work that they've done over these years and to grow this thing across the country because of the benefit that we've seen. So many leaders getting better at the work that they're doing. It's a cool company. Yeah, very cool. Today, however, our speakers are Mike Gill. He's going to be talking about, do I really want to be a CIO? Mike is with 5 Rivers Automation, and Rachel Clark, the CIO of the Bureau of Motor Vehicles. What could go wrong is the name of her topic. So I think we've all got experience with the BMV. It's like night and day compared to when I was young, but she's going to talk about how she went from night to day. So Mike, we're ready for you. Let me do the AV work.
So we all started in IT for the love of the game. For some of us, it was the Commodore 64 or something else that sparked your interest in IT. So and you should love what you're doing. You do it all day long. That's where you spend most of your time. So I'm going to get by a show of hands, how many people started their path in IT because they loved the game and because they wanted to reach the top? All right. Now, keep your hands up. And for anybody who is not 100% sure anymore, if you want to reach the top, lower your hand. I lowered my hand because I figured that the game has changed and I've changed. And ultimately that led me to the conclusion that being a CIO was not the right path for me anymore. I'm Mike Gill, and I was the CIO of an international manufacturing company for over 13 years. And I resigned and got paid no money for about a year. And now I can say that I'm about to celebrate the 2-year anniversary of my company, 5 Rivers Automation. And I'm here to talk to you about my journey on answering that question, do I want to be a CIO? And hopefully that helps you in your career path. So my career home was IBM in the late 1990s. Chicago e-Business Center is where I started. I was the best enterprise Java developer, and we were doing pervasive computing. And things have changed since then. You know, the rise of cloud, mobile, AI. But you know what else has changed is the users. The business users are more technically savvy, and your fellow executives and leaders in non-IT functions, they're more technically savvy. And they're now no longer just giving you a task and expecting IT to be some back closet operation. They're also getting involved with, you know, the decision-making process. And the scary, or maybe the optimistic way of looking at it, the cool thing is that they actually have decision-making capabilities now too. So when I looked at my career, I talked with somebody and I was introduced to this framework for leadership styles. It's from the book, The First 90 Days, and it's a STARS framework. And I looked at myself and I said, I was a startup and turnaround guy when I started my role as CIO. And when I ended, I was still a startup turnaround guy. But my company changed. They needed startup turnaround, and I got them to where they wanted, and they became sustaining success. And that friction started to build. And that's when I realized that that wasn't a home for me anymore. So you may have changed. Your situation may have changed. In order for you to find out what's the right home for you, you also have to find out who you are. And the one thing I will say is you can't go back to your old home. That doesn't exist anymore. I always say home is a time and a place. You don't have the nostalgia and say you want to go back home, but that doesn't exist anymore. So you got to look forward. So who are you? How do you answer that question? You know, you can look at things like the STARS framework for leadership styles. You can take assessments.
Talk to your family and friends. That's really important. Talk to groups like this. These are your colleagues. Build those relationships. Have honest discussions. For me, I'm lucky enough to have somebody really honest that lives at home with me, my wife. And she would tell me that you're not happy. She could sense it. You're not happy. Actually, she usually wouldn't say it that nicely. She would be like, get your shit together, is more like what she would say. But she was right. And what she helped me uncover was that I was going through a career midlife crisis. And when somebody first tells you that, you get very defensive. You're like, no, not me. But I will say, don't look at that as a negative. Look at that as a positive. Embrace it. All of you should have a career midlife crisis. That's a good thing. When I started at my CIO role, the analogy I like to look at it is like when you go to some side road and you see a broken down house on the side of the road, it looks condemned. You're like, somebody should just put a bulldozer to that thing. That's what I inherited. And I loved it. There was probably a fire in the back room that I had to put out first, and then I got to work. And what do you do when you need to fix something? You start from the inside. You build a solid foundation. Then you start maybe moving some walls around. Then you get to remodeling the kitchen, some bathrooms, and all of a sudden the inside of the house looks really nice. Then you move to the outside. You're like, you know what? Let's change the facade. Let's put a pool in the backyard, put some landscaping, and then what happens? People start showing up. They never wanted to come to your house when it looked broken down, but now when you have a nice looking house, they want to come over. And so you start having people over your house, and then they look around, they're like, why'd you put shutters up? You could have saved money if you put drapes. And that was kind of where I realized that that wasn't my home anymore. The landlord was telling me what I needed to do. And that's okay. I was introduced to a book that was called Necessary Endings. In our society, we look at endings usually as a negative thing. It's bad. Ending, bad. Oh, that's no good. But this book put a different spin on it. Endings don't have to be bad. They actually they can be good for you. And if you embrace that mentality that endings aren't necessarily bad, you can actually sit down and reflect. And that's what I did. So I started reflecting. I realized that the end should come, but I didn't know what I needed to do as my next step. And so I went to a comfort. I went back to like my childhood, early adulthood, and I started thinking about the things that brought me joy, and I found out that Peacock actually has the full WWE library. So I would spend a lot of nights by the fire pit and a lot of nights also by my TV watching old WWE matches, and I was reminded of one of my childhood heroes was Bret Hitman Hart. And for you guys who didn't follow wrestling as closely as I did, and I think I could probably win 80s, 90s wrestling trivia, so if anybody wants to go. Bret Hart was Canadian, so right there you know he was a good guy. By the way, I'm Canadian. So. And when he started his career, his dad was a famous wrestler, like a trainer, and he came from a famous wrestling family, and he focused on the technical skills. He was a technician. He was really good at the moves, and he took pride in not hurting his opponent. So, when I was a child, I believed it was 100% real, and now we call it sports entertainment, but there still is that physical aspect of not hurting your opponent. He took a lot of pride in knowing the moves, and what happened was that he actually came across another wrestler early in his career that said, hey, Bret, you being just a technical like a good technician, and I identified to that because I was the best Java programmer. But he said, Roddy Piper, another famous wrestler, told him, if you want to make it in this business, you got to learn how to talk. You got to get on that microphone and you got to be able to talk. So I wasn't too bad at talking, but back in my career, I took that kind of as a thing that I wanted to work on and learn to talk. And so Bret became champion, and he had a great career. And then wrestling started to change. There was a steroid thing that happened where all the big, giants like Hulk Hogan and the muscled up people, they kind of phased out, and it became more of the focus on people like Bret who looked a little bit more normal. And the other thing that happened was it used to be clearly good guy versus purely bad guy. And they started changing that kind of whole thing. And so the other thing that I would do a lot is, fun fact is a lot of these wrestlers have podcasts now. So I listen to Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Undertaker have podcasts, and you'd hear them reflecting about their stories. And they talked about, at the time when Stone Cold Steve Austin, who was another famous wrestler, was coming up, and Bret realized that he couldn't be just a pure good guy, and there was a shade of gray. But he learned to change with the game. And that's what I really embraced when I was listening to these stories. It sounds crazy, you listen to wrestlers, and they actually have really good advice for leadership. Just actually listen to what they're doing. And he knew that to make himself bigger, he had to help Stone Cold become bigger too. And so I listened to these stories, and I kind of identified with those things about my career. But the other part, that when you start listening to these podcasts with these wrestlers and stuff, you start hearing their personal side that you never used to see on the screen. And Bret was part of they call it a stable in wrestling, like a group of wrestlers make a group, and called the Hart Foundation. And the tragedy for him was there was 5 of those people in that stable, and he's the only one that's still living. His younger brother, Owen, had a tragedy in the ring, passed away, and the other members also had different things that came up. And why that hit me was during COVID, that 2-year period, I could identify with that because I lost people in my life. I lost my father-in-law, who I was really close to. I lost 2 of my childhood neighbors that I grew up with and lifelong friends. They're my age group. They passed away. My best friend's younger sister, so she's younger than me, she passed away. And then the one that really hit was kind of like, with Bret, with his younger brother Owen passing away. I had somebody that reported to me, who was a really good friend, one of my best friends. He got diagnosed with cancer, and within a few months he passed away, all during a 2-year time period. And so I remember talking to one of my friends, and he said, "Bro, time is our currency." And I want that to sink in with everybody. As you guys have progressed through your career, I was in the same boat when I started. I had no money. Money was the focus. And I've come to a point in life where I realize you have things and you really try to sort out what needs and wants really are. And when you put it in that perspective, it really focuses your mind on figuring out who you are and where do you want to go. Because time is our currency. So I got my passion back. When I was an enterprise Java developer, I used to say this. And now with IT automation, I say this. I say, I'm the best there is, the best there was, and the best there ever will be. And that's what you need to do. You need to find that passion again through this process of realizing who you are. Making change is hard. People naturally want to resist change, and you think, well, I'll just hold on for a few more years, and maybe I can retire or whatever it is. It's a little bit small, but I'll give you a lesson, another childhood, I'll say comfort, but maybe it's more of a childhood discomfort. The Toronto Maple Leafs, my hometown team. There was a famous playoff series in 2013 against the Boston Bruins, and they were down 3-1 in the series. It's a best of 7 series. And they managed to find their game and pushed it to a game 7. And here's me, super fan for the Leafs, like, yeah, they're going to do it. They found their game. You see it. And then in the game 7, they scored early in the third period. They were actually up 4-1 in a hockey game, which should be signed, sealed. That's it. They're going to win. And then they did something that nobody should do. They changed their game. They started dumping the puck, falling back, and playing defense. And I'm not going to go into too much more detail because I'll have nightmares tonight. But it still haunts me, and they ended up losing the game in overtime 4-3. So don't change your game. Bad outcomes will happen. So we're going to go through this little exercise in a second here. So look around. If you're sitting beside somebody you know, I'm going to ask you to pick somebody you don't know for this exercise. So just start thinking about this question as I talk about. So what is your career frustration, and what stops you from removing it? Okay? So just think about maybe like a paragraph or 2 to explain this in a second. So while you're thinking, I will let you know that I had a CIO friend that would meet me for coffee while I was going through this process of trying to figure out what did I want to do, who do I want, who am I? And we'd have a series of coffees, and he would say, you say the word unleash and full potential a lot. And I said, really? You don't you don't hear yourself sometimes when you speak, and it requires somebody else listening to you to tell you back what are the themes when you talk. And it actually is eye-opening when that happens. And I had another CIO friend that is a strong proponent of journaling, which I try to remember to do, and I sometimes do a good job and sometimes I don't, but I will strongly recommend journaling, even if it's just for a little bit. And then go back and read your journals and look at the themes that arise. It's eye-opening as well. So what I'm going to ask here is, if you guys pair off and spend maybe less, each person spend, I'll help time through this, but the first person to the other one will answer this question. And what the listener, I want you to do is focus in on 2 or 3 words that stood out to you as they're talking, either a theme or a strong word or something. And when time's up, I want that person to repeat back to that person, these are the words that stood out to me. And then we're gonna go around the other way. Okay? Does that make sense? So it's gonna get a little bit noisy in here, but hopefully everybody can manage. So if you don't mind pairing off, and then once we're ready, I'll do a little timer. All right, time. All right, just the 2 or 3 words. Anybody still talking is going to get put in a sharpshooter. All right. I would strongly encourage you guys to continue these conversations. They're powerful. But I want you to think about when that person told you the 2 or 3 words that stood out to them. Were there any surprises? Was there anything that kind of shocked you a little bit? The other question I would ask yourself is, would the younger you, when you started that career and you had that passion, would that person let those things be the things that stood in their way? Okay? Talking about frustrations. You know, when you're at the airport and you're late for a flight and you're on the escalator and you're standing behind somebody and you want to kind of get moving and you can't get there fast enough. I was introduced to another book by Reid Hoffman, and it's called The Startup of You. And they talk about how probably when most of us started our careers, it was the concept of a career escalator. There was this promise between employee and employer, and if you work hard, you rise the escalator, and at the end for a lot of us would be the role of CIO. I'll tell you, that escalator's broken, it's gone. Even if you try to get onto another job, you're just getting into another lane on the escalator. You're not going to end up where you want to go. You got to invest in yourself, your skills, your network, and you have to view it as building your own path. And in this book, The Startup of You, the concept there really is you have to look at yourself as an entrepreneur. And the business is you. You are the business. And have that mentality when you take a look at your career going forward. And it's open. My biggest piece of advice on that is do not compare yourself to somebody else. That only works when you're on the escalator and you're trying to push, and I'm going to push this guy behind me because I need to get one rung up on the escalator. When you view it as your path is your path, there is no place for having a competition with somebody else. So I'm going to say the other thing that I'm guilty of. This is my strengths finder. I'm not shy. Here it is. This is me. And what I bring this up for is we all have a tendency to not really look at the tools and the data that's given to us. What most people do is they'll jump to that right-hand side and they'll look at their top 5 or their top 10. They read the words and they think they understand what those words mean. Oh, I'm an achiever, I'm a this. And then what I did is I went to the bottom of the list and I was like, what do you mean I'm 34 in empathy? I was like, what? But the key I'm bringing up here is pay for the full assessment. And then go read what you paid for. And if you look at it, these words all have a definition. And I brought up, in my top 10 was individualization. And my 34 was empathy. And when I read the 2 of them, I'm like, yeah, it doesn't mean that I don't know that people are individuals or I work with them, and I took this in the context of work too. And I was like, it's absolutely true. Like, yeah, this is accurate. And the other thing that you have to come to grips with is all 34 will not be in your top 10. Okay? And so I say this because in order to know who you are, you have to know who you are not. Okay? So with that in mind, you know, in terms of growing and investing in yourself, when you have that big landscape in front of you as you're charting your course, you gotta invest in yourself. And so there's an ROI on what you want to invest your time on for learning. You can go from knowing nothing about a subject to a little something, from a little something to knowing a lot, and then you can go from knowing a lot to being world class. StrengthsFinder's premise is invest in your strengths. So that would be on the side of take something you're pretty good at, lean into it, go be world class. And then the other one that is a high ROI is just learning something new, just at a level of understanding what is it, just at the basic level. It opens up perspectives for you. It may open up career paths for you. But going from knowing something to knowing a little bit, not that high of an ROI. I'm not saying don't learn, don't do it, but I'm saying from a career standpoint, invest on learning something new or becoming world class. And this is what I did. I still am the best Java programmer, but now I know something about Python. And I'm world class in technology called RPA and leading into AI agents. I want to be known as, and I am world class in that. So everybody's gone through the exercise of also defining who they are by their core values. People kind of nodding their heads, kind of gone through that exercise. I will say that I have been in networking events where they attempt to do it in 1 hour, and I'm saying BS, that doesn't work. So this is mine. I went through a painful process of going through and defining what my core values were over months, agonizing months. And I'll quickly ask, freedom. What does freedom mean to you?
Do what you like.
Do what you like.
Optionality.
What's freedom to you?
No barriers, no restrictions. Yeah.
So where I bring that up is that there can be commonality between what your definition and your definition of freedom is. But I'm sure if you dug deeper, what that no barriers really means can mean something different. And so that's what I did. And I challenge you guys to take your core values, and this is I have a Word document with 5 pages, and I put my definition, just like a dictionary. This is what it means to me, why I chose it, and then I have other, those in the dictionary, like, other words that are similar that you consider. And I did that. And it's powerful because I will tell you, who doesn't want to buy a fancier car or get a fancier house just because you're, I got a promotion and this and whatever. But I go back to this and I say, no, if I do that, I put myself in a position where I can't have that freedom anymore. Right now, I can get my kids on and off the bus pretty much every day, and that means something to me. And that's my litmus test for as I move forward. So I will say that, I all challenge you to have your midlife crisis. If you've had it, do it again. Do it every year. And if you haven't, it's not a bad thing. Embrace it. And take your original goal. I'm going to use, for me, X means being CIO. So if it's, I look at, take, like in my case, X is CIO, and it's, do I still want to be X? And answer that question. And I look to my childhood heroes for inspiration, or it could be fictional. I actually debated about putting Iron Man up here or Mario, and I went with Mario. So Mario Lemieux, great hockey player, for those of you who don't know. But the reason I put him up here was when I was following his career, he grew up in Quebec, Canada. French was his primary language, got drafted at 18, went to live in Pittsburgh, didn't know English was not very strong for him, had the language barrier, had Hodgkin's disease, a cancer that he overcame in his career, had debilitating back injuries, and he played through them, couldn't even tie his own skates. And to top that all off, finally he's one of the best players, signs this awesome contract, top paid player in the league, and the Pittsburgh Penguins claimed bankruptcy. Can't pay you, sorry Mario. And I'm gonna pretend I know what went through his head. I wish one day I could meet him just to validate this. But you will see opportunities when you have the right mindset. And today he is the owner of the Pittsburgh Penguins. So my challenge to you is do the work. It's gonna be hard, but you can all be all-time greats in your own worlds if you put that work in. I know who I am. I learned that through a long process. I found my purpose. And if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, if you need somebody to have those coffee sessions with, just to listen or go further into what my journey was or listen to your journey, I'm all for it, just to help people out. But my one rule for it is if you connect with me on LinkedIn, you can't just send a connect request. You have to send me a note for why I should connect with you. Hey, I saw you, this resonated with me. I want to hear the stories. Start the conversation there. And then maybe in the future, we can have another session about my mission of humanized work. So, thank you.
Hi, everybody. I cannot decide if this was a troll that you put me behind Mike, thought-provoking presentation to say, oh, one might want to be a CIO, really think about it. I took a lot away from that, Mike. I'm definitely going to be following up and talking to you, and as I think about my presentation today and what I laid out for you, it's a lot about transitions too. I'm at a point in my career where we have a state election. I don't know if you guys are paying attention, but a lot is changing. It means a new governor for the state of Indiana, and I'm currently the CIO for the BME, which means just a lot of change. I would say this moment at the state feels a lot like you've ever been through a software acquisition. On the acquisition side of an M&A, when you're going through due diligence, and there's just this really intense period of someone new coming in and looking at every single thing you do and how you do it, and what the problems are, where the faults are. That's really what's happening at the state right now, times every single agency. And part of me looks at that and says, that is just so cool. I've done this many times. I've been on that due diligence ride many times. You have to come up to speed so quickly on a company. Cool. But we don't know on the other side of the transition what that's going to mean for anybody in any role in any agency at the BMV or at any agency. So I've been doing a lot of self-reflection. What have I accomplished over the last few years? What am I proud of? What are they going to find when they start opening that due diligence deck and looking at the BMV? And when Doug asked me to speak, it's really where my mind was kind of taking this retrospective back on what we've accomplished and what we've done at the BMV. So that's really what I prepared for you today. And it kind of starts with, for me, like, why did I take the job? Which this pairs perfectly with you, Mike, in your presentation. We did not plan into this, but in the interview process at the BMV, we talked a lot about how, you all don't have a choice. You have to interact with the BMV several times a year. And the system that you interact with is a massive ERP. It processes, I think I have some stats here, through 5 different mediums. This is just a little taste of the job and what really hooked me in the interview. You can do your transaction in person, online, at a self-service kiosk, which is some really cool high-tech stuff. In mail, over the phone, we do 50,000 transactions a day. We process 20,000 documents a day. Pieces of paper have to get saved and stored for 10 years by law. All this massive technology going behind it. It's mostly the 3 transactions that you're probably all familiar with, registrations, titles, and credentials, but there's 185 other kinds of transactions, which gives you a taste of how complex this ERP system really is. And there's a lot of money flowing through the agency. And prior to coming to the BMV, I had worked for mostly smaller startup software companies that were struggling to get to that $20 million revenue mark. I mean, we were just blitzed the size of the company that I was working for, those startup scale-up companies. And here, was gonna walk into a $150 million operating budget. My IT budget was bigger than annual revenue for, any company that I'd ever worked for. That all was really appealing to me. And I was also going to inherit a contract and state, combination of contract and state staff of about 100 people. So I thought, this is really great. The table is set. We can do a lot of really good things here, and this is a massive challenge. I can never say, well, one more piece that also appealed to me, there were all these integrations with other systems, with the feds to check on your social security number. If you bring a passport in, we have to check your passport. All these different data interactions. We talked to Department of Child Services, state police, they pull you over, they're talking to us. All these tentacles into this system that had to be maintained and nurtured. So it's really cool use case is what I thought in the interview as we kind of went through all this. This also was something they shared in the interview. All that said, it's doing all this stuff, but people generally really like us. Now, I'm not taking a poll in the room, I know better than that. I don't want to hear. I hear from all my relatives all the time what they do every time they go in to do any transaction. But this is not a disclaimer. This is not this data center. This is not anything to do with Expedient. But if you know much about the state of Indiana, a lot of our systems are still hosted in the government center, the 5th floor of the government center downtown. So I was interviewing on the 4th floor, and all this technology was running out of the 5th floor. And I could just see it in the room. Jason Sani may have been in the room, I can't remember if you were there, but there were 6 or 8 of us in a big conference room, and I could just tell something really bad had happened. People were checking their phones and looking. And the reality was the system stars had gone down during my interview. And you could just see the panic, fear, the stress, just terrifying. But I could never say I didn't know what I was walking into, because that became clear, that they were dealing with a pattern of unplanned outages and were struggling with how to figure out how to get their arms around it. So the table was set, they had a good operating budget, a big important mission, but they were really struggling to have stability or stable operations. Were you in that room, Jason? I thought you were.
You should consider Expedient.
Thank you, Rob.
No, still love you.
I do remember this. Jason, so I did take the job. Long story short, outage or not, I took the job. I thought, well, there's a lot of, this is a target-rich environment is what I told myself. Let's do this. And I remember Jason pulling me aside very early on and saying, hey, I know you come from the private side. What you might not realize is every time you have a misstep or there's a fault or there's an outage or anything, the press is like right there waiting to write about it. Just can't wait to put things about the B&B in the papers. And just this whole other element of, you don't have a board of directors right now. You have the governor, his cabinet, and General Assembly who can legislate and tell you what to do and dictate your roadmap, and they will do so at least once a year. All these other elements came into it, and it was partners like Jason and different people that pulled me aside and said, just so you know what you walked into, it's not like what you came from. And
It's never good to be in the paper.
never good to be in the paper. And I really, in the beginning, I remember thinking, is he serious? Is he really serious? And absolutely. That's Google, the B&B, read any of the articles. They love to write about any problems that we had, any government problems. So first 90 days, like when I look back, some of the lessons that I want to share, lots of books about this. I've read some of them. I don't remember any of them. I'm just going to go from what actually worked for me and what we did in the first 90 days. I really focused in this order on people, process, and technology. Less on technology, mostly people, process. And I did a couple things that really worked that I want to share. We created talent cards. I got this idea from my husband who worked at Roche long ago, and something they do there. So if any of you have worked or seen this at Roche, this is my own interpretation of what they did. What I did is I sat down with every person on my team, and I said out of the gate, look, I know you expect me to make a bunch of changes. I'm not. For the first few months, I'm not. I want to get to know each of you. I want to observe. I want to watch. That's all I'm here to do. That calmed people down a little bit, gave me a little bit of goodwill, a little bit of time, but it takes a while to earn people's trust. And so what I would then spend time with them doing is saying, let me develop this talent card with you. Let me help you do this. Let's take your resume and let's look at all the steps you took. By the way, can you tell me what was your raise and how did you feel about that raise? Why did you have that title change? Did you seek it for yourself, or Did someone just see a need and you applied, or how'd you get there? And having these conversations with people along the way and giving them an asset or giving them something, it's a PowerPoint slide, but it's a visual representation of what you've achieved and where you want to go. It's a way of letting me get to know people really well. It was an important part of this. I would ask them lots of questions, and it would take several different one-on-ones with each person to go through this process, but I think it was a really important part of getting to know the team that was already there and where they were, where their hearts and minds were. The one question that I would ask people that I still use to this day, I think it's a good one, is I would say, you go home, and you don't have to be working at night, but let's say you do want to work on something at night, and you open your laptop up, and you just want to do some work. What do you work on? What are you doing? Are you coding in Python? Are you cleaning out your inbox and responding to emails? You can learn a lot about a person when they answer that question and tell you, yeah, this is when I don't have to work, this is what I like to work on. And then you can start realizing people may or may not be in the right role. They may or may not be in the right position. And the more you can get to know them and the more they can get them to open up to you about what really makes them tick, the better you can put together a team that makes sense. So I think this was a really important part of what we did. We mapped all our processes. This was painful, but we went through all of our processes and mapped it. I'm sure you guys have been through exercises like that a long time, or many times. This was the development process for us. A lot of our outages, the next slide shows it. This is me scoring it. Not only did we map all those processes, but we scored it. So we kind of looked at it and reflected, and I would get everyone else's opinion. Like, how far do you think we are on this maturity scale when it comes to how we deploy our code, for example? That was one that got one of the really lowest scores, was code deployment. So just getting each other to look each other in the eye and acknowledge that we're really weak in that area and talk about how or why was an important step in making this pivot or making this turn. I also analyzed a lot of data. Oops, skipped one there. Analyzed a lot of data. Don't worry about it. Analyzed a lot of data. And there were a lot of information just kind of sitting there ready for me to understand where the outages were coming from. We just weren't looking at the data. We weren't aggregating it in a good way. We weren't really looking at the lessons to be learned from why these outages were happening. So that was a big piece of it. So in the first few days, or the first 90 days, we developed these committed outcomes. This is what we're going to do. This is where we think the biggest problems are. And I'm not going to go over every piece of this. If anybody wants me to share this slide, I'm happy to. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to share the top 5 things that I think mattered most about all the stuff that we did. The committed outcomes, developing this, was really about getting the executive leadership around me on board with what I was about to do. I was ready to make changes. I was ready to do some big shuffling of the deck. But I needed everybody around me to be on board with what I was about to do. And getting these committed outcomes agreed to at a very high level, this is my lane, my department, but here's what I want to do, what I'm committing to, was an important step of getting everybody ready for these changes that we were going to make. First thing, and the most important thing, the number one thing we did, was to establish a leadership team. We didn't really have one. It was confusing and chaotic, and people were performing roles, but they didn't have the accountability in their lanes, in their area. The one thing I would maybe add that was unique with B&B is I was working with state and contract employees. And so I leaned on Jason Sandy, Jeff Lloyd, other executives of other companies in specific disciplines to have the conversations about who we needed to have and what roles and what people brought to the table. Because at this point I had observed everybody, I had really thought about it, and I shuffled the deck. And this leadership team that we created started meeting weekly, bonding weekly, making decisions together weekly, thinking not just in their lanes, but about each other and what we were all doing. This was a key part of it, a key part of transformation. And I would say the most important thing to getting the rest of it right was getting people in these roles and establishing this leadership core. The second thing we did, which is also really mostly about people, we developed a change management process and a code red process. Now the code red process didn't exist. It existed in that people would see the email that stars was down and start to sweat bullets and freak out, but you had people that, were just the ones that always love to wear the superhero cape, and it's always gonna be me, no matter when it is, I'm gonna be the one to fix it, and I'm gonna hoard the information, because it's how I'm wired, and it's how the state has taught me to have value, because I'm the only one that can fix it when it goes down. That is a horrible way to operate, and everyone really knew it, but we had to put a code red process in place to make it clear that we weren't gonna operate that way anymore. So the code red process was a lot of different things. It was assigning someone to be the group that communicates. You're not the problem solver, but you're gonna be the only one that sends the emails. You're gonna communicate to the whole agency. Status, as often as you can, every 15 minutes if you can hit that. Not you, not you, not you, not you, not me. I'm gonna be the one calling the commissioner. That's my role. Call my boss, keep him updated. Just establishing those key roles, giving everybody cover fire or language for STARS is down. There's a core group of people that now have a free pass out of every meeting. They are in a war room or they're on a Teams call or a Teams channel. Just the basic stuff that I'm guessing you all know and you're all doing, but we weren't doing it. And that was a key piece of moving past this cycle that we were in. The other one was change management. Anytime there's a problem, the first thing you say is, we'll change. What did we change on that date? You couldn't answer that. There was no change management. That was very, very hard to do. What we did is we used Azure DevOps, and we created custom work item types for what I tried to make a cute name, because if you give something a cute name, people will roll off the tongue was the idea. I called them production update notices, puns. And I said, any change that is in our production environment has to go through this process, has to be written up, approved, you have to have a backup plan. Sometimes they're really simple. But every change will go into Azure DevOps and get approved, and there'll be, not only that, but we're gonna make sure that when we're planning this change, the people that actually have to do the work are cool with working on Sunday morning, because that was not a thing either. It was always the same superheroes that wanted to wear the cape, and we just expected them to work every Saturday or Sunday. Well, nobody wants to work that way for long. So let's have that be a process where we're kind of watching and making sure people accept and acknowledge that they want to do that one on that Sunday morning. So many things were part of that change management process that got us through all that chaos. That's a screenshot of it. That's just a screenshot of it. That's Azure DevOps. This is our change management board in Azure DevOps. You can see, completed puns in the last few days, whatever. You track them. The last piece. This is also, I hope you're typing a theme here, a people problem. We automated our deployment process. We moved our source code control to the cloud, finally, got it out of the government center. Created pipelines for deployments and automated the deployment. What that meant was, every time we did these high-risk deployment activities, it usually meant people worked until 2 in the morning. And it was, my first deployment that I went, stayed, thought, I'm buying pizza. I don't know what else I could do here to help, but I wanted to understand what was happening. And they showed me the deployment spreadsheet, and it was over 300 lines of individual tasks that individual people had to execute. And then they would, for a lot of them, if it was really high risk, they'd have a QA assigned too. And I looked at that and said, my word, how many times do you get this wrong? Oh, every time. The next morning we have to come in. Every time. Okay, right, that's just part of the process, part of the expectation. And I said, but everyone, you know what, we're all human. You're going to make mistakes. This is never going to be a fluid process if we don't automate it. So the automation was a really important piece of creating seamless deployments, and they're really, we call them nothing burgers now anymore. It used to be a real high-risk, scary activity. It's mostly automated now. It's just night and day. But this wasn't that long ago, so I thought, you know what, I'll share these lessons because maybe others are in the same boat that we were. The next one, we did adopt Agile Safe, and I think this was an important piece of, this is our calendar. This is important. This is where this is keeping on track. This is what was most important about it is, when I interviewed, that first interview, I think one of the things that was said is we keep starting projects and we never finish them. We need to stop starting and start finishing. It was like a thing that kind of came up in the interview that really appealed to me. I would say implementing Agile Safe is the way that we got everybody on the same page to use some kind of criteria to think analytically about what we were going to build next, what had the best, highest value for the business to build next or to do next. And we would, t-shirt size every opportunity and go through and argue or talk or make a use case, a business case among the executive team for what we were going to do next. And that got us from having like 20 things in flight to having eight or 10 at any time that we were committed to and that we could deliver with confidence on time and on budget. I think those were other big fundamental things that were wrong that we had to fix to get to this place of stability. So, to wrap it up, we developed a roadmap. Once we kind of got operations stabilized, we don't have unplanned outages like that anymore.
That's plastic.
I know. We developed a roadmap. That was another big piece of it. It's one thing to sit down and talk at any given time. These are the most highest priority projects we're going to be building, but you need to be looking further out and having that strategic look. These are things that you all know, but I think when I look back and I'm at this transition in my career, this phase where I'm trying to decide, do I want to continue being a CIO or am I kind of done with the C-suite? I've been doing it for a long time and there's a big piece of me that is really done with it. Which, ironically, your talk really spoke to today.
Great, we're gonna lose the one good person.
This is it. This is my last slide at the B&B. They're looking at a new governor coming in and trying to say, all right, are we going to modernize this system that I told you about in that very first slide? It's over 20 years old. I'm sure they were really proud of it when they built it in 2006. It's a big monolithic architecture. That's what everybody did in 2006. I'm sure that was the cool .NET, latest and greatest. Yeah, well, our feet are stuck in concrete now with this monolith, and we need to modernize it. And to modernize a system like that will be, $80 million or more, and be a, 3 to 10 year journey. Do I want to stay for that or not? I'm not sure. I'm having a lot of those same thoughts. But I have really, really enjoyed the ride, the stabilization, and what we've done these last 5 years at the B&B. So I hope some of that spoke to you or helped in some way. I hope we can kind of tie our talks together because I think
And
they
things
really
don't have
were.
to be negative, right?
We're very, very related. That's it. That's all I have planned.
Great
Sorry.
job. Rachel, a couple of questions. How did the team respond to these new processes and driving towards stable? How did the team get affected?
It's so interesting. When you work for 10 years in a certain environment and it's characterized by chaos and just making decisions like this, I call it muscle memory. It is still shocking to me to this day how muscle memory kicks in, even today. Like if I leave for a week, I'm on vacation or something, I see it kicking in. That's been surprising to me. But if you put enough guardrails in place and enough good process that helps people keep track of things, you can catch that muscle memory that still kicks in. But it is a little surprising to me that even 5 years later, that still happens.
Yeah. What about the superheroes? Did you lose any of the superheroes?
We
I mean,
did.
those were radical changes in their roles.
We did lose one key superhero. Jason and I exited one from the business. We won't talk names or anything like that, but the enterprise architect was a really key role. And very quickly we realized this was not the right person that was going to get on board with how I wanted to operate in an environment of transparency, everybody working together, one leadership team. He was not going to get on board. So we exited and made a key change there, all the difference in the world.
Wow.
I would say make those changes fast. And lean on your your partners, like Jason. I had another CEO at iLab, Jethro, that was very helpful and I could be very direct and honest with and say, I don't think this is going to work. How do we fix this together was really helpful. It wasn't on my own.
Thank you. Thank you. Excellent. So glad you made it here today. Remember, January 28th is our next meeting. I hope you made a friend today, chatting about what your career path looked like. I would encourage you to share this information and share the meeting with some of your coworkers or the church or the soccer field. Have a great holiday. Have a great day. Thanks.
Thank you.